Hey guys, Josh here from Sportitude running. Shoe review time. I'm going to be talking all things Hoka Kawana. So the Kawana is a stable, neutral, high mileage shoe and a slightly different take on the engineering of its foam. So looking for something with a little bit more pop through the forefoot, the Kawana is something to consider. So in today's review, we're going to dive into all the aspects, the outsole, the midsole, and the upper. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. First things first, before we dive into the engineering aspects of the Kawana, let's profile the foot type that you should be considering this shoe. So it is a stable neutral shoe, and what that means is for foot types that don't have too much tendency to favour that medial side. So if you're looking at someone with a high arch like this, so if you put that foot on a flat surface, a static position like though, you'll see a little bit of space between the arch and the ground. Now technically speaking, this runner would be more of a supinate bias, so as they come through the gait transition, more of the pressure would be towards the lateral side of the shoe as the foot engages, gets ready to transition through to the toe-off cycle. However, stable neutral sort of falls into a category like this as well. So you'll have a foot type that will look like mine, like this. So you put it flat on a surface like so. The arch will be a little bit closer to the ground. And again, as this runner transitions through their gait cycle, majority of the pressure will still be through the central part of the foot itself. And if there happens to be a little bit of tendency to be biased towards that overpronation, it is okay. I am a mild overpronator and I found the Kawana to be perfectly fine for my stability through my whole gait transition. Okay guys, in videos gone by, pretty much from day dot when I started reviewing shoes, I have gone from the outsole and worked our way up. I don't know what it is, 2022 feels like an exciting year, so we're going to mix things up today. So what I'd like to do is talk about the upper first up. So probably one of my favourite features of the Kawana was the fit and feel and the construction of the upper. So I hold the ladies model in my hand through here. It's a little bit cleaner than mine. It's seen some kilometres out on the road, so I thought that'd be a bit more appropriate. So with the upper itself, we have an internal heel counter at the back, so a good structured system around the back of that Achilles, which is going to give you a really decent lockdown around the back of your heel. Great thing about this shoe, it's still got that Achilles flare, which we've seen pretty consistent over the industry from nearly all brands are offering some form of Achilles flare. Hoka have been doing it for a couple of seasons now. And the other thing I really liked about the fit of this shoe at the back was the memory foam. So in the internal heel collar through here, there's a perfect amount of memory foam. So a little bit of extra stitch lining on the inside, both the medial and lateral side of your heel, provides just that little bit more comfort and structure, which is great. Obviously, there is the extra eyelet at the back which you can go to dial in that heel fit, be it a heel lock or a runner's lace to just give you a more secure fit. As you're coming through to the tongue region, now probably the other thing I noticed with this shoe was how thick the tongue was. Initially, before I put it on my foot, I thought that's probably going to be a little bit too much tongue. Didn't notice it once I got my foot in. Really good gusseted construction, so medial to lateral side there's a nice gusseted structure which is going to keep that tongue in a secure position, not only for the performance of the tongue but obviously to keep you nice and stable through mid-stance as well. Coming through to the forefoot, an engineered mesh, really breathable. One thing I must point out is it is a little bit shallower than most your mileage shoes from Hoka, so for you runners out there that are familiar with the Clifton and maybe the Bondi fit and feel, you notice them to be a little bit deeper through the forefoot. This kind of has a little bit of a similar feel to the Mark series, a little bit shallower through that front half. For me personally, I've really liked how this upper felt. Now, the other thing too to point out, it is only available in standard widths at this point in time. So I'd like to point that out. Being a new shoe, no surprises, most brands will only launch it in a standard width only. So that's a B in a ladies and a D in a men's. True to size, true to width as well. Next thing we'll talk about is the outsole. So this shoe here, no surprises, most Hoka shoes are pretty light on when it comes to the outsole configuration. However, if you're putting this next to your Cliftons, if you put it next to a Rincon, potentially a Mark, when you're lining them up next to each other, although they are three completely different shoes, there is a little bit more rubber coverage underneath the foot itself. Now, when you're looking at the outsole, you can kind of see that little marble coloured section through the forefoot. So Hoka have placed their outsole on top of almost like these little decoupled pods through that forefoot. So you've got plenty of good coverage through the front half of the shoe through here. I reckon it's going to be a slightly more durable outsole than what I've experienced previously with some Hokas, which again is probably more to do with the midsole, which we'll get to in two ticks. Coming back through to the rear of the shoe, there is again strategically placed hard wearing rubber at the back half of the shoe. You can probably see as you might be aware at home there's a little bit of a flared construction on that lateral side of that forefoot. Now that's a swallowtail geometry. Again, we'll get to that in the midsole part of this review. There is a little bit of exposed EVA through the midsection through here. Now it's probably hard to see on this brand new shoe. I'll hold my use pair up and you might be able to see what I'm talking about through here. So again, a bit of scuffing where there is no rubber which is protecting that outsole. For me, I don't think it's going to have any issues in regards to performance, longevity. It's a consistent thing with Hoka. They do happen to expose a little bit more of that foam, which is okay. It reduces the weight, and again, it's more to do with the performance of their Meta Rocket, which we'll touch on in the midsole part of this review. So in regards to the outsole, it is important to note there is a little bit more surface area on offer as well. So you can see itself as you're coming through from the heel right through to the midfoot and to the forefoot. There's plenty of generosity with regards to how much platform you have underneath your foot, which is a great thing. Now let's dive into the midsole, because for my opinion, this is where most of the magic actually occurs. Talk about the actual foam itself. It is a new engineered foam from Hoka. It's your CMEVA. Has some similar vibes to their Speedgoat 4 series. So if you're a Hoka fan and you know that shoe, you get a pretty similar fit and feel with regards to the compression of the midsole. They have dialed in a little bit to be a little bit more responsive through the forefoot. So it is a completely new revamped midsole from Hoka. And also the stack height's an interesting one too. So while we're talking most mileage shoes and you think mileage and Hoka, you think a really generous stack height, it is a little bit lower than what you would find with your traditional Hoka running shoes. So stack heights are men's, you're talking a 30mm heel, 25 forefoot variants of 5mm, and the ladies is a little bit different though. So the ladies runs at a 27mm in the heel and a 22mm in the forefoot. So again, keeping that heel to toe drop consistent, 5mm both men's and women's, just a slightly different take on how much shoe is underneath the foot. The other biggest point of differentiation is the swallowtail geometry. So I did touch on that a minute ago with the outsole discussion. So you can see at home there is a little bit more of a flare on that lateral side of the heel. Now that's going to play a huge part for that heel striker that comes down, wanting a little bit more compression. So if you're looking for a little bit more cushioning, Hoka have been pretty clever here. So instead of making the foam softer at the back half of the shoe, they've just been really strategic with how they've executed that little flare, which is going to provide ample crash pad sort of feel underneath the foot, which is going to compress at the right amount, which is going to slow down that mid-starts velocity, get the foot ready to engage and toe off through the forefoot. So while there is a bit of engineering or a lot of engineering thought behind heel strikers through here, I am a midfoot striker and I've enjoyed every part of this shoe from entry right through to the release of the Kawanas. The other noticeable discussion point which we need to talk about is the rocker. Hoka and rockers are two peas in a pod. We've got to talk about that, because if you're looking at your Bondis, they have a late stage rocker, your Cliftons have a slightly earlier stage rocker. This is kind of trending more towards a Bondi, has a slightly later stage rocker. However, because the foam changed with that new CM EVA, it is a little bit firmer. So what I found with this shoe, and what most runners out there will find, it is a little bit more responsive through the forefoot. So again, traditionally speaking, when you're talking Hokas and you're talking mileage, we don't tend to throw in that responsive word into the discussion. It's more about cushioning and compression. However, this shoe here plays on that slightly snappier feel through the forefoot, which again I've really liked. Touching on the midsole and the surface area, which we did discuss in the outsole configuration, I do like how this shoe performs when I started to fatigue through the forefoot. So again, in my longer runs, once I get to about 12Ks, depending on how I'm feeling on that day or what pace I'm running at, I'd personally like a little bit more real estate through the front half. So again, holding up my used pair through here, having more surface area through the front, just provided a little bit more stability as my foot was getting ready to toe off. So I really liked how this shoe felt through the forefoot. I gotta say, I liked how the original Kawana Light felt as well. And there's some pretty similar feels underneath the foot. The Kawana Light was a higher heel to toe drop. However, I really do feel this shoe has performed pretty similar to the Kawana Light through that front half of the midsole. And the other thing I do want to touch on is, again, I did speak about it in the intro with the outsole, but there is a little bit more rubber on that forefoot forefoot. I feel that the decoupled lines that they have placed in this shoe, it's a little bit more prominent than I've found previously with a lot of Hokas out there, but that's just to aid in regards to offering a little bit more compression in the midsole, because the midsole's a bit firmer. You still need some form of protection, a little bit more help, and that decoupled system underneath the outsole itself, especially the forefoot, just aids in providing a little bit more compression. Okay guys, that is my take on the Hoka Kawana. I do want to give you a little bit more information about this shoe because it is new to Hoka, it's completely new to the running market, and there's been a little bit of confusion about where this shoe actually sits in regards to where it would roll into your running shoe rotation. So to give you a bit of context around the stack height of this shoe, you've got your Bondis from Hoka which sit around that 33 heel, 29 forefoot. This little guy here is 3 mil lower, 30 heel and a 25 forefoot for a 5 mil drop. Very similar to your Clifton and your Marks. Now they're just 1 mil variant, so they're 29, 24. So again, if you're looking at how much shoe is underneath your foot, and you're pretty familiar with your Hoka running shoes, it's going to have a very similar stack to your Cliftons and also your Marks. However, when you're talking about your Hokas and where they sit in regards to which silo, so for example, if you're looking at your mileage shoes, your Cliftons, your Bondis, your Arahis, just to name a couple, will sit in that silo. This does drop into your mileage silo. However, it is marginally heavier. Okay, so really important to point that out because that was one thing I noticed, and as soon as I put this shoe on my foot, it felt a little bit more weighted, and I don't think that's a bad thing, which I'll tell you about in 2 ticks. Men's are about 283 grams in a men's size 9, the ladies are around that sort of 237 for a size 7. So if you're talking all things weights, it's still relatively light in the whole scheme of things. There's certainly a lot more shoes that hit that 300 plus mark. However, when you're putting a shoe like this on your foot, I think the consumers out there are going to want that Mark weight or that Rincon or even a Clifton sort of weight feel to ratio underneath your foot. You're not going to get it. It's going to kind of feel a little bit more biased towards your Bondis. However, the performance of the midsole is one that you could certainly get a very similar read from a Mark, and also some other shoes out there being your Glycerin from Brooks and also your Kawana Light from Asics as well. Now, one thing I will touch on with this shoe itself is that it is a new shoe, obviously being a stable neutral offering from Hoka, and I want to just point out the fact that being a Hoka doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a soft, squishy feel underneath your foot, and that is certainly playing right into that opposite sentence through here. So it's a slightly firmer, more responsive, snappy feel under the foot. Some reviewers have come out and said this shoe is really going to be one that's targeted for your athleisure runners. I totally disagree with that. I really think this shoe itself is going to perform quite well for someone who might be new to the brand, okay? So if you're coming from a Brooks, maybe an Asics, maybe a New Balance, and you're wanting that lower heel to toe drop, still plenty shoe underneath your foot, but you're leaning on a little bit more weight and construction, I would throw the Kawana into the conversation. It's going to perform really, really well for the right foot type out there, and for that person that's happy to go a little bit higher in the 200s with regards to your men's weights and looking for a really smooth transition. This shoe here is going to stay in my rotation until I completely burnt them out. I've really enjoyed running in it, and yeah, so that's my take on the Hoka Kawana. Now, if you have any questions, queries, series, want to know what about the swallowtail, if you've run in your Hokas and you're questioning whether this is going to be right for you, just drop us a comment in the comment section below. And if you've got any other questions around your running shoe selection, please subscribe to our channel, hit the red button, because we'll keep pumping out these shoe reviews for you, the running community out there. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. Take care of each other, and we'll see you out on the road. Happy running.